Welcome to IP Goes Pop, your source for exploring the interface between intellectual property and pop culture. The IP Goes Pop podcast series is created and produced by Walt Koenig, an intellectual property law firm based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Visit us at vklaw.com. This program should not be considered legal advice. Please consult an attorney for your specific situation. And now your host, intellectual property attorney, Michael Snyder.
Greetings and cheers, listeners. Welcome back to IP Goes Pop, the podcast that asks who invented that, or whose brand is that, or who wrote that. Today, we're going to get into the who wrote that part of it with an interesting discussion about movie pitches. So we're back once again. We're joined by friend of the podcast, frequent guest, fellow shareholder at Walt Koenig, Joe Gushue. Joe, thanks for joining us again.
Mike, it's great to be back. Happy to start 2021 on the podcast with you, talking about movies, one of my favorite subjects.
Oh, believe me, we're going to count on your comprehensive, universal, and encyclopedic knowledge of all things movies in this and future podcasts.
Well, thanks, Mike. I had a lot of time on my hands the last 10 months. Unfortunately, I haven't seen many great movies, but they're all still up there somewhere.
And we'll talk a little bit about rewatching the same movie over and over again, I'm sure, at some point on this or another podcast. But again, this is not legal advice. Here's a little disclaimer. If you have a legal question, please see an attorney. Today, we're talking about what happens when someone believes that their movie or idea was stolen. A lot of IP is considered in this, mostly copyright at this point. So again, we're talking about, copyright, some original ideas. To set the table a bit, picture yourself in Hollywood. You're at a pitch meeting and you give the movie this idea that you've had. You've had it your whole life, this incredible idea for a movie. And they say, okay, thank you. We'll get back to you. And what do you know? 2 years later, you see something you believe is similar up on the silver screen, if it is in fact silver. You could be in a coffee house or a coffee shop running into some executive at a movie studio and say, hey, I always thought it would be funny to have a movie about animals or something in cartoons. And that actually is a foreshadowing a case today. So, when that happens, remember also, yes, people have good ideas, but movie studios are in the business of making movies. They have thousands of scripts piling up, some with similar ideas. There was an expert in a case that I had once who said there hasn't been any new ideas since the Egyptians. And I think about that sometimes when I think about new ideas, but copyrights have what we call the idea expression dichotomy. An idea is never protected by copyright. It's only the way you express the idea. So the way you make your painting or the way you write your screenplay. If you want to protect the ideas, Joe, what could you do to protect an idea briefly?
Well, first, you can shoot me an email or give me a phone call because you're looking to get a patent attorney involved to help you out at that point.
Which we talked about a lot on our Urban Legends podcast that you and I did. So you might be able to protect it with a patent. That's another podcast, another story, but you could not protect just the idea through copyright. So today we're going to be talking a lot about how people expressed their ideas. So we have the idea expression dichotomy, and now we need to talk about two concepts where there are certain elements of stories or art in general which can't be protected by one person. The first is called the merger doctrine. And under the merger doctrine, courts will not protect a copyrighted work if the underlying work, and I'm reading from a court case here, can be expressed in only one way. So basically, you can't have a monopoly if there is only one way to express a thing. What we say is that the idea of the thing and the expression of the thing have merged. And Joe, I'm gonna bring you in for an example of merger in what I'm going to call the found footage movies. So I think if you know some examples offhand.
Yeah, one of the first ones that just jumped to mind maybe would be the Blair Witch Project. That was a pretty famous found footage movie where they used camcorders. The movie was shot using lower budget camera equipment, and it was filmed in a manner that something terrible happened to the people capturing the footage, and someone then went back and stitched the footage captured on these cameras together, then made a movie out of it and released it that way. It was a way they had attempted to release a horror movie.
So some of the elements of the Blair Witch Project, which, by the way, when people told me about it originally, they said it's really scary if you don't think it's a movie.
Oh, yeah.
And then I said, is it a movie? And they say, yeah, it is a movie. I said, well, then it's not that scary.
Then it's not that scary. But it was, the internet was young at the time. No one knew. You couldn't really fact check things like this. It was almost just urban legends amongst people going out into the movie seeing public. And it sort of got a life of its own in that people did actually think this was found footage to the uneducated.
Let's talk about Blair Witch. What do you have? Shaky camera, quick cuts where you don't have it's unlike a movie that's, filmed and edited. You try to make it look like people are holding the camera, running through the woods, constant motion.
And it created one of the first unique scenes of having the camera pointing at the actor, like the actor almost holding the camera, looking at themselves with it. And you saw that type of shot used in a number of TV shows after the fact, and just that was a unique way of capturing the action in that particular film.
So let's say the Blair Witch group or producers or people who wrote it, they see now Cloverfield years later, which is a found footage and clearly poses itself as a found footage movie. And they say, oh, look, it's, same thing, Joe, that you just described, turning the camera on themselves, shaky footage, a lot of quick cuts, running around, bad lighting. They don't really have a claim, right, to protect the idea of the found footage movie.
No, for the reason you said, Mike, if someone were able to get protection on that type of idea, they would almost have a monopoly on that type of film. And that's not something that people want to grant to people in the movie making business, because it doesn't have the same limitations on it that a patent would have on it. And also, similarly, patents at the same time want to be sure not to preempt an entire type of idea. So this is a theme that's found across all sorts of intellectual property law, in that the government wants to give you protection on unique ideas, but at the same time, they don't want to stifle any expression in a particular area.
So that's the merger doctrine. And that leads to the second doctrine, which is called scenes of faire. It is, although a lot of law adopts Latin terms, it's a French term translated to that which must be done. And the scenes of faire doctrine says that you can't protect common themes, or courts won't protect a copyrighted work from infringement if the expression necessarily flows from a commonplace idea. So if you think of a common theme or a common setup, I'm going to give some examples of common stock elements. And Joe, if you want to just rattle off as a few that you could think of, I'm sure you can, because it will, I think by doing this exercise, it will show people and demonstrate by example what scenes of faire means. So let's say the wacky neighbor in a sitcom as an idea, as a setting.
Yeah, like another thing, the angry boss that you typically will find in a lot of different films and television shows.
Oh, by the way, can you give, just off the top of your head, a couple wacky neighbor examples?
Well, I think back to Don Knotts in Three's Company, and then Wilson the neighbor in Tool Time with Tim Allen, and that Kramer, Seinfeld, weird neighbor. You almost have a weird neighbor, Ralph Cramden from The Honeymooners. It goes back,
right.
Almost a century.
The seminal wacky neighbor.
If you have a sitcom, you better have a wacky neighbor with it, because it's almost part of the program there.
I like, by the way, when you put on your Hollywood producer hat and say things like that. Get me a wacky neighbor. The mean boss, even in, I was thinking of even from the Flintstones to the Jetsons to I Love Lucy. Not that they're mean, but, the gruff boss is another kind of.
Yeah, it's either the gruff boss or like the clueless boss. There's never just that normal baseline boss, because I don't think that elicits the emotion necessary in movies and television shows.
No, I agree with you. I think that of course you have to have some kind of dramatic hook. How about First Time in the Big City?
Oh, well, that's a lot of films that go back to New York, but I think of like Crocodile Dundee, coming to the big city, fish out of water.
Fish out of
Then you
water.
have the Beverly Hillbillies. They're going from one setting to another, but it's just a conflict is introduced by someone getting fish out of water in their new place.
So our point here is that one writer writing a sitcom that's a fish out of water movie couldn't sue another one just because the idea of a fish out of water. I mean, it's commonplace. Again, we call it in copyright world scenes of fare. Just sharing that isn't enough for copyright infringement because we again we cannot kind of remove the ability of someone to do, a police officer in the gritty, downtown or something like that. There's,
I mean, Mike, like you were saying earlier, I bet the Egyptians had some of these things.
I'm sure, yeah.
First time in the big city, someone showing up to Cairo, they're like, "Oh, we've heard this before. It's been around since then." So don't act like that's new.
I can't pull it right now, but I feel like there's a wacky neighbor in a Shakespeare play. But we might do a podcast just on kind of Shakespeare and bringing it to modern day. But so here's what I want to do now. So we have idea expression, we have merger, we have scenes of fare. There's sometimes a situation, this was big in the 90s and early 2000s, but almost to the point where you feel like you're imagining things where there are two movies released at the same time that seem to be the same movie or are very close or are purposely released at the same time, maybe to take the wind out of the sails of one of the movies. Joe, I'm going to put them out to you and let me know if you've seen them. Let me know what you believe about them or a comparison. So
Sure thing, Mike. Yeah, prepping for this, it was pretty funny. I went back and did some research, and I actually think I thought I saw one of these films, but it was the other one that I actually saw, and I can't even remember what the film was about, and I mixed up the actors in both. It's so similar.
the interesting thing about that is they can be that close, but if they're only sharing common elements, they're not copying each other in a copyright infringement way. So let me start with our twin
Yep.
movie countdown. First one is Volcano and Dante's Peak.
They both involve a volcano. And I know one of them involved Pierce Brosnan. That just sticks in my head from the movie poster with Dante's Peak. And I think Volcano had Tommy Lee Jones in it. So quite funny that even the film elements being the same, picking actors of roughly the same age at the same time. And yes, this was definitely a plague in the 90s, Mike. I think
Yeah.
these movies of similar concepts really picked up steam then and moving forward from then.
And again, I can't match them up properly either. I do recall Tommy Lee Jones. There might have been Anne Heche in the mix.
I
I know that I know that
She may have been in both movies.
yeah, she was in both. Could have been. I know Tommy Lee Jones, obviously, it's Tommy Lee Jones, so he's going to be gruff and serious. And I know that Pierce Brosnan was in the other one. It's going to be kind of actiony. So still, you can have two movies. They're about volcanoes exploding. You can have that because they're only sharing kind of common elements that you can build a story around, but they expressed it differently.
Yeah, these disaster movies, you'll see that happen a lot. As people tend to like, oh yeah, I remember something like that. This phenomenon really finds disaster movies and then animated movies too, same time. So just as the genre of movie, they're very susceptible to this.
I was thinking of the zombie movies because they all might have a subtle they all kind of have, and maybe the vampire movies but the zombie movies have a subtle difference in how they set up
The type of zombie.
yeah, exactly.
Yes, the type of zombie. And with these, you're saying Dracula movie?
Well, the vampires, the
Vampire movies, yeah. So yeah, like 30 Days a Night and the Blade and like a bunch of those movies. But I did some research on this, and in 1979 there were actually 3 or 4 movies about Dracula released. So it's pretty remarkable. There was Nosferatu, Dracula, and Love at First Bite, all based on Dracula, all released in 1979.
I don't want to age myself too much, but I will tell you Love at First Bite was a disco Dracula movie. I'm pretty sure with George Hamilton, and that's all I want to say about it. And Lauren Hutton, I can't believe, Joe, when you and I start talking about these things, I'm shocked at what we kind of have in our mental Rolodex that's still rattling around. All right, let's go back to twin movies. These are two that I know at the time people were like, it's the same. Armageddon and Deep Impact.
An asteroid hitting the Earth. One of the first times people, I think, were buying tickets to one and seeing the other by accident. But Armageddon, obviously, taking it from the lighter side of things, and Deep Impact showing you the more personal side of a asteroid impacting the Earth. So, uh, again, people, I think this was peak twin movies in these mid 90s where everyone is questioning why two different movie studios are releasing the same exact film. But looking at the box office for some of these movies, there is a clear winner, but most of them make out okay. There isn't a big whiff by one of the studios, but there is that race to get to the box office first with things.
So here are two, they share the same subject matter, but to me, one is iconic and almost legendary. I'm probably going to watch it tonight. I'm not even kidding. Same subject matter, Tombstone and Wyatt Earp.
Oh, yeah. They're both cowboy movies. It's excellent. One with Kevin Costner in Wyatt Earp. I know he's a big fan of the Wild West and even Yellowstone currently. And then Tombstone with Val Kilmer and Kurt Russell.
Well, they both about the same. They're both about Wyatt Earp to different extents. One is more kind of a personal meditation, the Costner one.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is certainly a team up, almost like an Avengers of cowboys.
Famous Western heroes, yeah, with the ending with the gunfight at the OK Corral.
No spoilers, but if you don't know this story, you need a different podcast. But yeah, it was at the time, the two Wyatt Earp movies or the two cowboy movies. I think on closer inspection, they're very different, but certainly the producers of one could not go after the producers of another one based on the just sharing the story of Wyatt Earp, which is a historical story at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's another thing, Mike. Yeah, it's definitely in history movies because there's another historical fiction or, another historical person with movies made at the same time. That would be Braveheart and Rob Roy, which are both set in Scotland. And at that same exact mid 90s period that we're talking about, these movies getting released, the odds of two films being released about Scottish historical figures at the same time, pretty small, but the studios are definitely aware of what the other ones make.
Yeah, well, and so many kilts, so many. Um, all right, I think we did a good job of kind of going over the basics and using some examples, which I think really tell the story. I did want to talk about before we dive into two cases, which are interesting cases. Some of the defenses, if you were accused of copying someone's idea or someone's story, some of the defenses available to you are, first of all, independent creation. So if you can document and show that you came up with this independently, that will certainly go a long way in your defense. The other one is if you didn't have access to the work that someone is accusing you of infringing. So, for example, sometimes screenwriters will accuse a studio of taking their idea, but the script may have physically been sent at the time or digitally mailed nowadays to the studio, but maybe no one opened it, or it was in a stack of 30 scripts that a script reader never got to. So if there's no access, if you could show that there's no contact essentially with one of the works, that's a good defense. Another one is finally, no substantial similarity. So even if you saw the other work or heard about it or heard a pitch, the ultimate creation that you have, you have basically an independent creation and they're not substantially similar. And the way we look at that is we kind of pick them apart. So let me move into the first case, which is Esplanade Productions versus Walt Disney Company. I don't know if people know Walt Disney is a movie company that makes movies, if anybody ever heard of it. And this is interesting. The subject matter is the movie Zootopia. Joe, could you take us through some of the background? If you could just do a short synopsis of Zootopia. By the way, did you see Zootopia?
I have two young children, so yes, I have seen Zootopia at least once.
Listen, I will admit I saw it multiple times with my daughter, and I watched it myself at least one time.
Oh yeah, I've seen it once, beginning to end at least, and then my children watching it the hundreds of times they've seen it. I've seen walked through the room, been there for parts of it, so I've seen it once, beginning to end, and at least 10 more times, stitching together all those scenes that I've seen. But I am familiar with the film. And I can set a little bit of a background for Zootopia for anyone who does not have young kids or has not seen this animated film. It is a story about a young bunny in this world where all the animals have human characteristics. And it's this bunny becoming a police officer, going to a big city, and then getting involved in the police force, a crime. There's obviously some drama there, but it is about all of the animals living together peacefully and something disrupting that. And it was a very good movie. Recommended if anyone has not seen it or they need something to watch this weekend.
And I think, I mean, there are themes in there of being, it's kind of a city mouse, country mouse situation, speaking of common themes.
Yep.
So you truly have a country rabbit in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it also has themes of, can you change your personality or what people think about you? So anyway, we pitched this movie enough that we're not getting any royalties. But so Walt Disney gets accused from Zootopia copying another work which was pitched to them, and I believe it was under the name Looney. But Joe, if you have a synopsis of that one as well.
Yeah. So Looney, again, at its base, was about animals having human characteristics and them uh, basically being in a city together, dealing with different themes. And the characters they were drawn very similar to the ones found that you would see in Zootopia. But basically, this premise was a zoo where animals would go to work, they'd punch in, and then at closing time, they'd punch out and go home. But these animals living a life similar to the ones found in most American, ordinary everyday lives. And it was just really set in that sort of zoo setting with things.
And by the way, I'm going to try to post on the landing page for the podcast. Right in the court's decision, there actually is a snippet of the artwork from the Looney, from their. And by the way, they were both. Oh, one thing I do want to say, both of the works were named Zootopia, which I think probably upset the author a bit. Although you cannot protect a title by copyright, so really there was no infringement in using the title. Although Zootopia sounds also like a fruit drink. But I'm going to put in some of the artwork for anyone familiar with Zootopia. It is pretty reminiscent of some of the characters. I mean, there's a sloth. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, extremely similar. Yeah. If you were to look at these, it's like, oh, that looks like you can see how these concept artwork could be found in the film Zootopia from this pitch.
So as we peel it apart, though, the pitch is really, it doesn't have the police force. There's a live action concept to it. There's a cartoon action concept to it that is not like Zootopia. So in copyright, we have this extrinsic test, which pulls apart protectable and non-protectable elements, and you filter them out, and you look at the protectable elements, and you put it back together. And I guess in this particular case, the court found pretty clearly that the protectable parts of the works were not similar. Basically, story, even the characters' personalities and things did not turn out to be actionable here.
You made a good point with the author getting upset maybe with the similar title that was the same. And in many of these cases, you'll find that someone just wants credit for their idea and they feel a bit slighted by not having been given the credit. So it's the studios and authors alike need to be careful to take the advantage of some of those protections that you had sort of said, some of the defenses. Be aware of the defenses that someone can raise if they find themselves in this situation. And then also make sure that they're doing everything possible to put themselves in a good spot to raise those defenses. And then knowing what sort of weaknesses you may have if you do not, take all the precautions necessary. If you're in the business of making movies and things like that, and making sure you're screening everything properly, and making sure you're in a good spot to protect yourself when you're accused of taking someone else's idea.
Yeah, and I think that, one of the other things that was keyed on here, or actually you mentioned, sometimes they do fix these things, and in fact, it's kind of a trope in movies about Hollywood where people in the movie are accusing someone. What they'll do is give them a producer credit or some kind of credit,
Hmm.
and of course, a royalty might go with that. In this situation, while I think it also goes to show you that if you look very broadly in comparing, this seems, as you look at the case and you say, boy, it's, a city full of animals doing animal things. But then as you drill down and go through this kind of peeling away in the extrinsic test from copyright, you start to look at what these stories are actually about, what the characters are actually doing, and there are differences.
That's a great point, Mike. Yeah. As you drill down in almost anything, if you drill down far enough, you are going to find differences there. And that's part of the analysis that's gone through. So there needs to be extremely similar features that are you can't filter out in order to.
And by the way, by the way, when you think about going back to an old Warner Brothers or Looney Tunes cartoon, whatever the company that owned it at the time, there was the sheepdog that would kind of punch into work and the coyote that would punch in. And it was like but their jobs were kind of attacking and defending each other.
Being the sheepdog and being the coyote. Yeah, exactly. This is nothing new. Taking animated animals and making them act like people. Like you said, the Warner Brothers and Looney Tunes have been doing that well before Zootopia was even dreamed of.
I really think, though, there's subtle things that could have made the case go a different way in this particular case. I think, for example, if there was a police force setting and a crime in the animal world, I don't know how that would have been explained.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with you, Mike. Just outside of those details or some plot elements, there just really wasn't anything to nothing actionable or anything inappropriate about the similarities.
Now, the next case is called, and the title of the movie isn't in the case, called Buchwald versus Paramount Pictures. It's out of California. Again, a lot of our cases are out of New York and California, home to the entertainment industries. The movie at issue, Coming to America. A movie that is.
And Mike, let me just interrupt you real quick. We can drop a plug for the Coming to America franchise. The sequel is coming out on March 5th, Amazon. So everyone should mark their calendars for the long-awaited sequel to the original Coming to America, where Eddie Murphy will be reprising his role.
I wonder if in the sequel they're going to face any challenges like we're about to talk about.
That would be interesting.
Coming to America is in many people's top 10 or 20 comedy movie lists. I mean, this is kind of again, not to overuse the word, but it's an iconic comedy starring Eddie Murphy and Arsenio Hall, and a really an excellent cast, although they play half of the cast, I would say. Um, Joe, do you think we need to recap Coming to America? I guess briefly.
No, maybe briefly. I think it's everyone's seen it on cable here and there. It was a darling on cable for probably the last 20 years. The one thing I did find interesting by doing some research on this was Eddie Murphy was inspired to make this movie based on his role that he played in Trading Places when he was on the train and he was in character. And that's what inspired him to come and make this movie. But Coming to America, in a couple lines, is a movie. Eddie Murphy plays a member of a royal family in an African nation. He comes over to America, a fish out of water story. He's very nice and seems to be a bit naive with the way of the world. Finds himself in a big city with his helper, played by Arsenio Hall, who's there to watch after him as a member of a royal family, and he just wants to live a normal life and not as a member of a royal family, having people looking after him. And he tries to make his way in America. So, Coming to America, fish out of water. Eddie Murphy, one of the biggest movie stars at the time,
And he wants to find his queen, who is not royal,
his queen.
just a
Yep.
regular daughter of someone who owns a McDowell's fast food chain. So that's
another IP part. Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't even think about that.
I mean, what I love about this, and you just nailed it, is that there's a huge IP component. Look, this is what we do, so we catch it. I don't know if anybody watching Coming to America is as excited, but it is a really funny part of the movie where they talk about the difference between McDonald's and McDowell's and Mr. McDowell.
They got the golden arches. We got the golden M. I forget what his response was, but he had a defense ready.
He's like, now I think the Big Mac has two all beef patties, but they use one. I mean, there were there were very subtle differences, but it's kind of funny because the movie itself was accused of infringement from well, give us some of the background facts of the case.
Oh, so it is really interesting that there was in Hollywood, a lot of movies and ideas start out as like a treatment, as a short pitch. You want to try to sell someone on your idea. So the author here, which is Buchwald, he had come up with a treatment with a concept of someone in a royal family, and only this person was quite mean and not as nice as the Eddie Murphy character later in actually Coming to America. But he had wrote a pitch and presented it to Paramount Studios, and Paramount Studios really enjoyed this idea of someone in a royal family coming over to America, and the name of the project at the time was called King for a Day. And basically, this person was a bit mean, but a lot of the same concepts that you can pull from the Coming to America story. And this movie was, or this treatment and project was in development for a number of years. And the author of this was paid to keep the option of making this into a movie open a number of times. And it just the different writers were attached to this project. The project was actually presented to Eddie Murphy by Paramount, and he was reacted favorably to this idea for a movie. Again, going back to he liked who he had played on the train in Trading Places and was interested in exploring that and playing additional characters in a movie. So basically, it looked like a movie was going to get made with this entire idea, and that our plaintiff here, Buchwald, was going to get some more money for his treatment getting turned into a film.
And then there's a shift in the story.
Yes, as with most cases brought to court, there something unfortunate happened here with the author. So Eddie Murphy turned out to really like the film.
Well, like the idea.
Oh, like the idea of the story, yes. And then there's a work going back and forth with different drafts. Ultimately, this person and the original studio, they sort of split ways. They go different ways, and turns out, as the plaintiff is then pitching another studio on this idea, he learns that Eddie Murphy's making a movie called Coming to America based on this original idea, and he's doing it with another studio, and he's not going to be compensated for it.
So, and looking at the story that we know of Coming to America, when I looked at this case, other than I have to say, even though the plaintiffs prevailed here, I have to say I didn't see that. I think it was all of the contact and the revising of the scripts and the working together that really led to the decision. But the story, the original story that was pitched, is drastically different. For example, just making the character kind of a mean and gruff character changes the tone at all, because Eddie Murphy's Prince Hakeem character is so so overtly friendly that he's singing in the middle of the street as people are yelling at him.
And when he's welcomed to the neighborhood there, and he's becoming more familiar with American expressions. Yeah, I completely agree, Mike. I think here in this case, the reason that the person prevailed was due to the option being extended, them receiving payments over the years as keeping the option to make the film still open. So receiving payment, there's extensive contact with the movie studios here. But the character in the King for a Day was very mean and gruff, and he was going to basically come over, basically be abandoned by his royal family, cut off, and then have to make a new life for himself in the United States. He ultimately finds love and everything, but it doesn't have that redemption that Trading Places has. It doesn't have all the characters and personality that Eddie Murphy was able to inject into the role of Prince Hakeem there. So it is a bit tenuous to say that the King for a Day was exactly the same as what ultimately turned out to be Coming to America.
I'll say another thing about this. I would love to have seen the original story also made as a different movie, but more of a kind of either a dark comedy or a drama. I mean, it's also the story's good and it's different enough that I think it could have held up as a different movie.
I completely agree, Mike. Unfortunately, this was the mid 80s and not the mid 90s. I think if we're talking in the mid 90s, we would have had definitely seen King for a Day released a month after Coming to America.
Well, the conclusion of this story, the plaintiffs did prevail. One of the writers received the recovery was $150,000, which is many times what they were originally offering, and the other received $750,000, also many multiples more than the studio was offering. So they saw it as a complete success, and I'm sure this took a long time, to get through the trial, but that's all the time we have for this podcast. I do want to end with the quote that I did find from Coming to America, where Mr. McDowell is described. Now, this is pure IP, and if this is where you are when you're talking to your IP attorney, you may be in trouble. They have the Big Mac. I have the Big Mick. We both have 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, and onions, but their buns have sesame seeds. My buns have no seeds. So,
I mean, he was trained. He knew how to just draw distinctions between.
I guess he's saying the rest are scenes of fare or commonplace, and really it comes down to the bun seeds. But with that being said, Joe, thank you so much. We could go on and on. There's more cases. You'll be back. We'll talk more movies. We'll talk more pop culture. Joe, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mike. It was great to be here.
And for IP Goes Pop, keep those ideas coming. Keep expressing yourself. Come up with new, interesting ideas. Maybe you will pitch them. Maybe they won't get stolen. Maybe they will, but maybe we'll find out on the next episode of IP Goes Pop. Thanks for listening.
The IP Goes Pop podcast series is created and produced by Volpe Koenig, an intellectual property law firm based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Visit us at vklaw.com.